My name's Ethan. I'm 24, and I thought I had everything figured out. I'd been dating Madison for over 2 years. Small-town love, late-night diner dates, walking through the park under streetlights. It all felt perfect. Until it wasn't. I remember the day it started unraveling. Madison had been acting weird for weeks, distant, always on her phone. I brushed it off, thinking maybe she was stressed with her job at the boutique. But that Friday evening, when I came home early from work, I found messages that made my stomach drop. Explicit texts from someone named Ryan. At first, I couldn't breathe. My hands shook as I scrolled through the conversation. I didn't just feel anger. I felt a deep, twisting betrayal. Everything we'd shared, the inside jokes, the late-night talks, the promises, it all felt like a lie. Madison wasn't the girl I thought I knew. When I confronted her, she didn't deny it. Her eyes weren't filled with remorse. They were cold, detached, like I was nothing more than an inconvenience. "Ethan, it just happened," she said, trying to shrug it off. But it wasn't just a moment. It was weeks of lying, secret meetings, and stolen kisses. I left that night, driving aimlessly down empty streets, my mind racing. Small towns have that weird way of feeling suffocating when your heart is broken. Everyone knows everyone's business, and yet here I was, feeling utterly alone. I tried talking to friends, but no one really understood. "Move on," they said. She wasn't worth it. But they didn't get it. I didn't just lose a girlfriend, I lost trust. And in a town this small, trust is everything. It wasn't just about the betrayal. It was the way she smiled at me the next morning like nothing had happened. That fake warmth burned more than her lies ever could. I realized something that night. I didn't just want closure. I wanted justice. But I wasn't ready to act. Not yet. I needed time, space, and most of all, someone who understood what it felt like to be deceived. Someone strong enough to face the fallout with me. Little did I know, life was about to introduce me to Vanessa, and nothing would ever be the same. Over the next few days, I avoided Madison as much as I could. I wandered through familiar streets, stopped by the diner, tried to immerse myself in anything to distract my mind. But every place reminded me of her laugh, her scent, the way she leaned on my shoulder while we watched the sunset. It was like my entire life had become a loop of memories I couldn't escape. And yet, somewhere beneath the anger and heartbreak, a tiny spark of something else was growing. A need for change. A need to reclaim my life, my dignity, and maybe, in time, my happiness. That spark would guide me to the next chapter, though I had no idea what it would bring, or who would walk into my life to turn everything upside down. It was a Tuesday evening at Miller's Coffee, the one place in town that felt quiet enough for reflection. I sat in a corner, staring at my lukewarm cappuccino, when she walked in. Vanessa. She wasn't young, maybe 34, but she carried herself like someone who had seen the world and wasn't afraid of it. Her eyes caught mine by accident at first, a flicker of curiosity. She smiled, not in a flirty way, but like she recognized the storm in me. I can't explain why, but I felt compelled to talk to her. "Rough day?" she asked, sliding into the seat across from me. There was no awkwardness, no hesitation, just certainty. I told her everything, briefly at first, then spilling the chaos of betrayal, heartbreak, and confusion. She listened without judgment, occasionally nodding, occasionally sipping her coffee, letting me unravel without interruption. There was a strange comfort in that. She understood pain, not because she was perfect, but because she had her own scars. Over the next few weeks, Vanessa became a regular presence in my life. We'd meet at that coffee shop or walk through the town square, talking about everything and nothing. I found myself opening up in ways I hadn't with Madison, even with friends. Vanessa had this quiet strength about her. She didn't offer empty advice or try to fix my problems. She just listened, asked questions, and occasionally challenged my thinking. I began to notice details, the way she tilted her head when thinking, the faint laugh she tried to suppress at small jokes, the subtle confidence in her gestures. And slowly, impossibly, lines blurred. What started as friendship developed into late-night dinners, lingering touches, and a subtle attraction that neither of us fully acknowledged at first. One evening, she leaned back against a park bench, looking up at the stars. "You're not yourself lately," she said softly. "But you're stronger than you think." It was the first time anyone had said that to me in months. Her words felt like a lifeline. I realized I didn't just enjoy her company. I craved it. There was warmth, understanding, and a thrill that made my chest tighten in ways I hadn't felt since Madison. Yet, even as I started to feel drawn to Vanessa, I was aware of a dangerous thought creeping into my mind: the idea of revenge. The memory of Madison's betrayal still burned like an open wound. I couldn't stop thinking about what she did, how she'd smiled while lying to me, and how casually she treated the relationship we had. Vanessa noticed it too, I think. There was a glint in her eyes during one of our conversations, a subtle suggestion that maybe, just maybe, justice didn't have to be passive. And while I wasn't ready to act, the thought lingered, twisting with the emotions I was beginning to feel for her. By the time I left that evening, I knew one thing. Meeting Vanessa had changed everything. I wasn't just a broken young man anymore. I was someone on the edge of transformation, and the next chapters of my life were about to be anything but ordinary. The first time our hands brushed, it felt electric. I tried to ignore it, pretending it was nothing, but Vanessa didn't let it go. She smiled knowingly, teasing me with subtle words and glances that made my pulse race. There was an unspoken understanding between us, a tension that was both thrilling and terrifying. One rainy evening, we stayed late at Miller's Coffee, lingering after the crowd had thinned. The dim lights reflected in her eyes, making them look even more intense. We talked about our pasts, the mistakes we'd made, and the people who had hurt us. I noticed how naturally she guided the conversation, drawing out truths I hadn't admitted even to myself. "You've been carrying a lot alone, Ethan," she said softly, her hand resting briefly near mine on the table. "You don't have to." That simple statement broke something in me. I reached for her hand, and this time, I didn't pull away. Our fingers intertwined, and the warmth that shot through me was undeniable. It wasn't just attraction. It was connection, trust, and comfort all wrapped into one. We didn't rush. Vanessa knew the difference between passion and recklessness. Our relationship grew in moments. Coffee dates that turned into long walks, casual dinners that stretched into late-night conversations, and the stolen glances that hinted at more than words could say. There was a moment one evening that changed everything. We were walking through the park, fog rolling over the grass, and she paused, turning to face me. "Do you ever feel like life gives you second chances?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, unsure of how to answer. She stepped closer, and I felt the heat of her presence envelop me. "Sometimes, the universe sends someone not just to heal you, but to help you fight back," she said, a hint of mischief in her tone. That statement stirred something deep inside me, a mix of desire, anticipation, and a dark curiosity about what it could mean. Our closeness didn't just awaken passion, it awakened purpose. For weeks, we explored our connection carefully, savoring every touch, every shared laugh, every look that lingered a second too long. Vanessa had this way of making me feel alive, like I wasn't just recovering from betrayal. I was reclaiming my life, piece by piece. But the past wasn't something I could ignore. Madison's betrayal still haunted me, and as my bond with Vanessa deepened, the idea of revenge began to take shape in my mind. It wasn't about cruelty. It was about reclaiming what she had taken from me: my trust, my peace, my pride. Vanessa seemed to understand before I even spoke it aloud. There was a subtle look in her eyes, a quiet agreement that perhaps justice could be served with cleverness rather than anger. And as our relationship shifted from connection to something undeniably intimate, I realized we were more than just partners in passion. We could become allies in reclaiming my life. That night, as we sat together watching the fog curl over the streetlights, I understood that everything had changed. Vanessa wasn't just a new beginning. She was the spark that would ignite the plan I hadn't yet dared to imagine, and the passion between us would fuel what was to come. Weeks passed, and my relationship with Vanessa deepened, both emotionally and intimately. Every moment with her felt charged, not just with desire, but with a shared understanding that we were in this together. It was during one of those quiet evenings at her apartment that the idea first surfaced, a thought that had been lurking beneath the surface, finally demanding attention. Vanessa poured us each a glass of wine, sitting across from me at her small dining table. The city lights filtered through the blinds, casting thin lines of gold across her face. She leaned back and looked at me with a subtle smile. "You're still thinking about her, aren't you?" I hesitated, feeling the weight of both guilt and anger. Every day, I admitted. But I don't just want to dwell on it. I want closure. Maybe more than that. Her eyes narrowed slightly, a hint of mischief flickering. Closure can be boring, she said. But what about justice? A little poetic justice, maybe? It was the first time I realized that Vanessa wasn't just offering comfort. She was offering partnership. Someone who understood not only my pain, but also my desire to reclaim my dignity. I felt a surge of adrenaline, an excitement that mixed with something darker. The prospect of turning betrayal back on Madison in a controlled, deliberate way. We started small. Vanessa suggested observing Madison subtly, gathering information about her routines and habits. We didn't want to do anything reckless, just enough to make an impact without putting ourselves at risk. I felt a strange thrill in the secrecy, in the shared glance whenever we passed a piece of useful information between us. It was more than revenge, it was strategy. Every plan we discussed was calculated, down to the smallest detail. Vanessa was patient but precise, teaching me to think 3 steps ahead rather than reacting impulsively. I realized how much I admired her not just for her beauty or confidence, but for her intelligence and the way she could channel emotions into action. And yet, even as we plotted, our bond deepened. Sitting side by side late at night, whispering over notes and ideas, our hands would brush, our legs would touch, and the tension between us never fully faded. The passion we'd built wasn't overshadowed by the plan. It fueled it, giving me a clarity and focus I hadn't had before. I thought back to Madison and the careless way she had treated me, the betrayal that had cut so deep. The anger was still there, simmering, but it was no longer all-consuming. With Vanessa, that anger became energy, a tool, rather than a burden. Over time, we refined our approach. We wouldn't humiliate her publicly or stoop to cruelty. Instead, it would be subtle, ironic, and undeniably satisfying. A misstep here, a revelation there, enough for Madison to feel the weight of her actions without us ever appearing vindictive. Sitting across from Vanessa that night, I realized how far I'd come, from a heartbroken young man to someone capable of thought, desire, and determination all at once. And as I held her hand, feeling the warmth and confidence that radiated from her, I knew that together, we weren't just planning revenge. We were reclaiming control over the parts of my life Madison had tried to destroy. The plan had begun, and there was no turning back. The first move wasn't dramatic. No confrontation, no messages, no late-night texts filled with anger. Vanessa insisted on subtlety. Revenge that screams usually backfires, she said. The kind that whispers lasts longer. Our plan began with distance. I stopped reacting to Madison entirely. No replies. No accidental run-ins turned into conversations. In a small town, that alone was noticeable. People expect drama after a breakup like ours. Silence, I learned, made people uncomfortable. Vanessa encouraged me to focus on myself publicly, but naturally. I started going back to the gym, showing up at local events I'd avoided since the breakup. I laughed more. I smiled more. Not forced, real. Healing looks convincing when it's actually happening. Word traveled fast. It always does. I heard through a mutual friend that Madison was confused. She thought you'd be more broken, he told me. I didn't respond, but inside, something shifted. For the first time since the betrayal, I felt grounded. Vanessa played her part carefully. She never appeared as my girlfriend. Not yet. She remained a presence just outside the frame. Someone I was spending time with, nothing more. Mystery, she explained, was more powerful than confirmation. One afternoon, while grabbing groceries, I ran into Madison unexpectedly. She froze when she saw me, eyes scanning my face like she was searching for cracks. I greeted her politely, calmly, and kept walking. No anger, no bitterness, just indifference. That moment did more than any argument ever could. I could feel it. Later that night, Vanessa smiled when I told her. That, she said, was your first win. But the real move came a week later. Madison worked at a boutique downtown, one that depended heavily on reputation and regular customers. Vanessa, being new enough in town, walked in one afternoon, well-dressed, confident, impossible to ignore. She didn't mention me. Not once. She simply asked questions, chatted warmly, and casually brought up a story about a friend who'd been cheated on recently. She never accused. She never pointed. She just let the conversation breathe. People talk, especially in places where there's little else to do. Within days, I noticed the shift. Madison started watching me more closely whenever we crossed paths. Her confidence, the careless edge she'd worn during our breakup, was gone, replaced by something uneasy. Vanessa and I talked through everything each night. We checked ourselves constantly, making sure the plan didn't turn into obsession. She was firm about that. This is about reclaiming your power, she reminded me, not giving it away again. And she was right. The more measured our actions became, the less angry I felt. Revenge, done right, wasn't explosive, it was controlled. There was a moment, lying next to Vanessa one night, when I realized something important. I wasn't doing this because Madison had hurt me. I was doing it because I refused to be defined by that hurt. Madison had taken my trust. She hadn't taken my future. The first moves were complete. No one could point fingers. No bridges were burned. But the balance had shifted, and Madison could feel it, even if she didn't yet understand why. The change in Madison didn't happen overnight, but once it started, it was impossible to ignore. In a town this small, reputation isn't something you own. It's something everyone else carries for you. And slowly, hers began to feel heavier. She started showing up in places she never used to go. The gym, Miller's Coffee, even the park near my apartment. Always accidental. Always just close enough to notice. I never acknowledged it. Vanessa told me that recognition was fuel, and I wasn't about to give her any. Instead, I focused on what was real. On evenings with Vanessa that felt calm and deliberate. On conversations that didn't revolve around pain anymore, but growth. She challenged me constantly, not harshly, but honestly. Watch what people do when they're no longer in control, she said one night. That's when you see who they really are. Madison proved her right. A mutual friend pulled me aside one afternoon and asked, carefully, if I was doing okay. When I said yes, truthfully, he hesitated before adding, she's been telling people you were emotionally distant. That the breakup wasn't really about cheating. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was predictable. Madison was trying to rewrite the story before it finished writing itself. The problem was, she was too late. Vanessa and I talked it through that night. She didn't react with anger. She never did. She simply nodded and said, then it's time for the truth to surface. Not from you, from the pattern. We didn't confront Madison. We didn't defend ourselves. Instead, Vanessa suggested something smarter. I stopped protecting her. When people asked what happened, I didn't overshare. I didn't rant. I simply told the truth, plainly and calmly. She cheated. I found out. I left. No embellishment. No bitterness. Just facts. Facts spread faster than gossip when they're consistent. Within weeks, the tone around Madison shifted. People weren't cruel, but they were cautious. Invitations slowed. Conversations shortened. That effortless charm she'd relied on no longer worked the way it used to. I saw her one evening outside the boutique, arguing quietly with Ryan, the guy she'd cheated with. Their faces were tense, voices sharp but restrained. It hit me then. The life she'd chosen wasn't turning out the way she expected. And for the first time, I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt clarity. Vanessa noticed the shift in me immediately. You're not angry anymore, she said. I think I'm done being, I replied. And I meant it. Our relationship deepened in ways I hadn't anticipated. The passion was still there, but it was grounded now, balanced by trust and mutual respect. She didn't save me. She walked beside me while I figured things out myself. Madison, on the other hand, was unraveling. She sent me a message late one night. Just one line. Can we talk? I stared at it for a long time. Then I showed it to Vanessa. She didn't tell me what to do. She never did. She just asked, what do you want? The answer came easily. I wanted peace. I wanted forward motion. I wanted my life to keep expanding, not circling old wounds. So I didn't reply. That silence wasn't revenge. It was closure. And somewhere in that quiet, I realized the balance had fully shifted, not because Madison was losing, but because I was finally winning. Silence can only stretch so far in a small town before it snaps. I knew that. Vanessa knew it too. When Madison showed up at my door one evening, I wasn't surprised. I'd felt it coming, like pressure building before a storm. She looked different. Not dramatic, not broken, just tired. The confidence she once wore so easily sat awkwardly on her now, like a jacket that no longer fit. Ethan, she said quietly. Please. Just 5 minutes. I hesitated, then stepped aside. Not for her, but for myself. I didn't want unfinished business lingering in my head. Vanessa wasn't there, and that was intentional. This was something I had to face alone. Madison didn't waste time. She talked fast, words tumbling over each other. About mistakes. About confusion. About how things got out of control. She blamed timing. Stress. Even me, just a little. I listened. Calmly. The way someone listens when the answer has already been decided. You cheated, I said when she finally stopped. My voice didn't shake. You lied. Everything else is noise. That was when the mask finally cracked. Her eyes filled, frustration bleeding into desperation. You don't understand how hard this has been for me, she snapped. And there it was. Not regret for what she'd done, but resentment that it had consequences. I realized then that the revenge had already worked long before this moment. Not because she was hurting, but because I wasn't. I'm not here to punish you, I said. And I'm not here to save you. I'm just done. She stared at me, like she was searching for the version of me she'd once controlled. He wasn't there anymore. When she left, the apartment felt lighter, quieter, like something old had finally burned out. Later that night, I told Vanessa everything. She listened the way she always did, fully, without interruption. When I finished, she smiled softly. You handled it exactly right, she said. Not with anger. With truth. That night, lying beside her, I realized something important. The plan we'd made had never really been about Madison. It was about me learning how to stand up without becoming bitter. Madison had wanted a reaction, drama, validation that she still mattered. Instead, she got closure on my terms, and that was something she couldn't take back. The confrontation wasn't explosive. It wasn't cinematic, but it was final. And for the first time since everything fell apart, I slept deeply. No replaying conversations. No imagined arguments. Just rest. The next morning, I woke up knowing one thing for sure. The past no longer had a voice in my life. Whatever came next, good or bad, I would meet it as someone whole. And with Vanessa beside me, I wasn't afraid of what the future held. After the confrontation, something unexpected happened. Nothing. No messages. No rumors. No sudden twists. Life didn't explode or collapse. It simply kept moving. And for the first time in a long while, I moved with it instead of being dragged behind. Vanessa and I became more visible together, but never in a way that felt performative. We didn't post photos or make announcements. We just existed, at the farmer's market on Saturday mornings, at quiet dinners downtown, at community events where people slowly began to understand that whatever chapter Madison and I had shared was truly over. I noticed how people looked at us. Not with judgment, but with curiosity. Vanessa carried herself with an ease that made gossip feel pointless. She didn't compete with Madison, didn't compare herself, didn't even acknowledge the past unless it mattered. That confidence was contagious. One evening, sitting on her balcony with the town lights spread out below us, I asked her if she ever worried about how this started. The plan, the revenge, the intent behind it. She thought for a moment before answering. Intent matters, she said. But so does evolution. What started as protection turned into growth. That's the difference. She was right. Somewhere along the way, revenge had stopped being the goal. Self-respect had taken its place. The irony was that Madison ended up facing the consequences anyway, not because we forced them, but because truth has weight. I heard later that she'd quit the boutique and was planning to move to a larger city. A fresh start, she told people. I felt nothing when I heard that. No anger, no relief, just neutrality. And that, I realized, was the real win. Vanessa and I talked about the future carefully. No rushed promises. No dramatic declarations. Just honest conversations about what we wanted and what we were afraid of. She never treated the age difference like a power imbalance. Only a difference in experience she was willing to share, not impose. Being with her taught me something I hadn't expected. Passion doesn't have to be chaotic. It can be steady, intentional, deep without being destructive. There was a night when she looked at me and said, "You know, you didn't need me to get through this." I smiled. "No, but I'm glad you were here anyway." That was the truth. She hadn't rescued me. She had walked alongside me while I learned how to stand again. As weeks turned into months, the town stopped whispering. Stories fade when they're no longer fed. And mine was no longer about betrayal. It was about growth. I didn't win by hurting Madison. I won by becoming someone she no longer had access to. And standing there, with Vanessa's hand in mine and a future that felt open instead of uncertain, I understood something clearly. The best revenge isn't destruction. It's peace. Time has a strange way of smoothing sharp edges. Months passed, and the intensity of everything that happened faded into something quieter, more manageable. The town felt different, not because it had changed, but because I had. I started noticing how little Madison occupied my thoughts. Her name came up occasionally, usually through secondhand stories, but it didn't trigger anything anymore. No tightening in my chest. No urge to defend myself. Just a distant awareness, like hearing about a stranger. Vanessa noticed it before I did. "You don't flinch anymore," she said one morning as we walked through the park. "That's how you know it's real." She was right. Healing wasn't loud. It didn't announce itself. It revealed itself in moments. When I could laugh freely, when I could talk about the past without reliving it, when I could imagine the future without fear creeping in. I thought a lot about who I'd been at the start of all this. The version of me who felt small, disposable, easily replaced. That guy had believed love meant endurance, that loyalty meant tolerating disrespect. I didn't judge him anymore. He didn't know better yet. Vanessa and I never pretended we were perfect. We argued sometimes, calmly, respectfully. She didn't manipulate, didn't test me, didn't disappear when things got uncomfortable. That consistency rebuilt something in me I hadn't realized was broken: trust. One night, sitting on the hood of my car outside town, watching the stars, I asked her why she'd stayed, why she'd gotten involved at all. She smiled faintly. "Because I recognized where you were," she said. "I've been there. And because you chose growth instead of bitterness." That answer stayed with me. Growth wasn't accidental. It was a decision I kept making, even on days when it would have been easier to fall back into anger. I also realized something uncomfortable but important. Revenge hadn't healed me. Accountability had. Honesty had. Choosing not to become the worst version of myself had. Madison's betrayal was real. The pain was real, but it no longer defined the story. It was just the inciting incident, not the ending. The town still felt small sometimes, but it no longer felt suffocating. It felt like a place I had outgrown emotionally, even if I still lived there physically. Vanessa and I talked about possibilities beyond it. Not escape, just expansion. Travel, new work, new environments. No rush, just openness. Looking back now, I don't feel grateful for what Madison did. I don't believe betrayal is a gift, but I do believe in responsibility for how you respond when things break. I didn't get closure because she apologized. I got it because I stopped needing her to. And that realization, the quiet, steady certainty that I was no longer carrying resentment, felt like freedom. By the time the following spring arrived, Vanessa and I had built something that felt enduring, even in its quiet way. Our connection wasn't just passion or clever strategy. It was trust, mutual respect, and the kind of intimacy that comes from knowing someone has seen your worst and chosen to stay anyway. We spent weekends exploring nearby towns, taking spontaneous road trips, laughing at small misadventures that didn't matter to anyone but us. Our conversations grew deeper, often spilling late into the night, not because we were trying to fix anything, but because we genuinely wanted to know each other's thoughts, fears, and dreams. I thought often about how far I'd come. The 24-year-old version of me, sitting in my apartment heartbroken and consumed by anger, would never have imagined this life. He wouldn't have believed that pain could transform into clarity, resentment into patience, and heartbreak into the foundation for something new. Madison faded into the background completely. I stopped hearing about her, stopped worrying about what she might say or do. It was a relief I hadn't anticipated. Not because I disliked her, but because she no longer held any power over me. She was a chapter, and chapters end. That was the lesson I carried forward. No one gets to live in your head rent-free unless you invite them. Vanessa and I talked about the future carefully, but without fear. Age, experience, even the past, it didn't feel like a barrier. It felt like a roadmap of lessons we'd both learned. She never overshadowed me, never dictated my decisions. She offered guidance, strength, and partnership, and that difference in experience became a source of comfort rather than tension. One night, as we watched the sunset from the balcony of a small cabin we rented for the weekend, I realized I was truly content. Not the fleeting contentment of distraction, but the deep, steady kind that comes from knowing you've faced betrayal, grief, and uncertainty and come through intact. Do you ever think about all of it? I asked Vanessa, gesturing vaguely to the horizon and to the life we'd left behind. Sometimes, she said, leaning her head on my shoulder, but only to remind myself how far we've come. I smiled. That was exactly right. The past wasn't gone, but it no longer controlled me. I had reclaimed my story, my peace, and my capacity for love. In a small town in America, life moved slowly. But we moved with it, together. No dramatic revenge. No lingering bitterness. Just two people who had survived chaos and learned that strength isn't measured by how loudly you strike back. It's measured by how steadily you can live forward. And as the sky turned gold and the wind carried the faint scent of spring, I realized that for the first time in years, I wasn't defined by betrayal. I was defined by choice, by love, by trust, and by the courage to move forward. Vanessa squeezed my hand, and I squeezed hers back, silently acknowledging that whatever came next, we would face it side by side. That, I knew, was victory.